Hello, welcome to Programmers Week. I am Ancuța Pârvu and I am now broadcasting from Timișoara, Romania. Here is a really beautiful day and I hope you are having a great day too. But today we are going to talk about psychology in the web and I hope you are going to have a great time and learn some interesting things. To give you just a little bit more of a context about me, I've been a programmer for the past year and a few months. But in the meanwhile, I have started studying for a master's in digital marketing, which really broadened my interest in many other things. Psychology also has been a part of my life since high school, but more like a passion of mine. And now during these difficult times with the pandemics going on and people working from home and many having a difficult time to adjust, I had the great opportunity to gain a scholarship for a marketing institute in the United States, where I am now studying towards a mini degree on digital psychology and persuasion. Since then, I learned many interesting things, and I think some of them are going to feel like you already know them, but some can be used in your daily life, not only just in your professional life. One example I would like for you to keep in mind is during job searches, you'll see that you can use many of these techniques and you will also recognize some patterns you see in your daily life. Besides that, I hope you are going to have some fun and let's just dive in. I split the presentation into 4 main modules. There is the first one, you can also see it there, it's called People and Psychology. Then we are going to talk about attention basics, decision-making and emotions, and the psychology of websites. I would also like to tell you that at the end, I have prepared a few takeaways from this presentation, and I focused mainly on persuasion techniques, which you will be able to use later. And also for a Q&A and debate session, I would really love it if you could get engaged or state your opinions and really have a debate if it's possible. For the questions you are going to have throughout the presentation, you can ask them in the Q&A section. We'll be checking it at the end. And besides that, if you feel like you have an intervention or something to say which is going maybe to strike some debate or some difference of opinion, you can feel free to interrupt me at any time with no problems. So jumping forward, when I first started learning more about psychology on the internet, I asked myself some ethical issues. I would also like for you to think about them during the presentation, but I would need, if it's possible, if someone wants to volunteer, I would need someone to answer to these questions right now at the beginning, as I want to do, let's call it research, because experiment sounds a little bit harsh or troublesome. And I would really like to get a few volunteers who are going to answer these questions both now at the beginning and at the end of the presentation, just to see if there are going to be some changes in your answers or opinions during, after learning some new things from my presentation. So does anyone want to try? You can write your answers here in the Q&A. I'll leave this on the screen just a little bit longer. So basically what I wondered myself is if it's ethical to use psychological things to make people buy. You will actually be surprised, just as I was at the beginning when I started studying this, how many psychological tricks are involved in order to make you buy more, buy faster, or just buy from a certain company instead of buying from its competitors. You can also see on many websites, I'm sure you have also encountered before this presentation, some situations where you see using companies using fake data or just cutting corners in order to get more customers, which in my opinion isn't really a good practice, but it seems to be effective. Another question I asked myself, if it's okay to justify a bad thing such as personal data or using some shady, let's call them shady, advertisement techniques, just because in the end it will bring more benefit to the company owners in terms of more money probably. Also, is it ethical to employ people to advertise your product even they cannot truly reinforce its advantages. And here I thought more about influencer marketing or public person speaking about certain products, because in many cases those are people who hadn't even tried the products, or at least not used it long enough to have like a clear opinion, an objective opinion, to call it like that. I'm sure you are also aware there are many SEO tricks. SEO is search engine optimization. This basically makes your site stand out more in Google search results especially. And it is well known that there are many design tricks, many keyword tricks which are used to boost this. Instead of having a great overall functionality or great personalized content or even a great design. So let's see what you think about this after learning the following things. The first module, it's people and psychology. I'm sure you all think that people can be amazing, people can also be awful, they can be good or bad. In general, they can be whatever they want to be. But after all these years, considering all the modern research techniques and medical techniques, scientists haven't even managed to figure us out entirely, both in terms of, let's call it physically speaking, like anatomy and composition and different processes that go on in our bodies every second, even as we now speak, but both in terms, but also in terms of human behavior, human psychology, and the importance of the brain and its many functions and different impact brain injuries or brain traumas can bring to the behavior of the people. I'm sure you have also heard of some examples of people who sustained brain damage and after that they had modified behavior or they started learning to speak a different language. This is still a mystery for science, but consider that even if science progresses every day by a lot, the human brain has stayed pretty much the same for the past million years. So considering the fact that it's still a mystery, I think it's pretty complex and a very interesting topic. So now the agenda for the first modules. For the first module, we'll be talking about the principles of persuasion stated by Cialdini. You'll find out about him more in just a second. Then we'll be talking about some neuromarketing basics. I know it sounds really fancy, but trust me, like the level we are going to have right now isn't going to be so high, so you will get the hang of it really quickly. And after that, I'll be talking to you about some cognitive biases and fluency, and you'll find out more, maybe even about yourself by learning about this. So here you can see a quote by Robert Cialdini. He's a professor, a marketing professor and a social psychologist. He has taught at Stanford, Harvard, and now he's teaching at a smaller university, but he is still very appreciated by all his students. You can, this is my favorite quote about human nature. As you can see, all things being equal, you root for your own sex, your own culture, your own locality, and what you want to prove is that you are better than the other person. Whomever you root for represents you, and when he wins, you win. This is also some kind of a bias, and I can admit I am, let's call it, guilty of this, because you can see this very clearly in sports supporters. You tend to root for your own locality. This is also my case, and of course, when they win, I win. So moving on to the principles of persuasion, Cialdini had released a book in the 80s called Influence, which is still considered to be, even nowadays, the basic book of digital marketing and content strategy. You see here the principles he stated. I'll be starting to talk about reciprocity, which means to give a little something in order to get a little something in return. This actually treats the fact that people tend to pay their moral debts especially, and they tend to behave nicely with those who behave nicely with them. So for example, this is used on the web in those websites who offer you like free downloads or free tools, or even some gifts with your first order, discounts. There are many examples of where that can be seen on the internet. The second principle is social proof. And there is nothing like feeling validated based on what others are doing. For example, nobody wants to feel like they are the only weirdo and wants to belong to a group, because since the dawn of time, humanity actually survived like this. Since they started living together and forming a primitive form of society that assured people more comfort, more protection, more food. And it is actually hardwired in our brain even after so many years of evolution. For example, on the web, you can see this applied by those websites who show many testimonials, show many reviews, even show big numbers. You won't think about this probably, but it's pretty impressive for a customer to go on a website that even shows like they have many social media followers or many clients. Besides this, you can see some websites which enforce the fact that they have famous clients, and this is especially seen in those who are selling like software products or services, because it has more of an impact. If you never heard of that company before, but you are interested in its services, you are going to be more likely to buy if you see some big companies that you already know and probably admire, that are working with that tool, or that has already been a customer of this company. Besides that, there was a great social experiment done in the 60s. It is called the elevator experiment. And it actually showed the fact that people want to be part of a group and not to think individually. There was an elevator set up in New York City where there were many people inside, and all the newcomers were encountering those people inside doing weird things like facing the wall, or I don't know, dressed in bathing suits, or the different things which are certainly out of the ordinary. And people tend to adapt to those situations without thinking about it. You can also see that in people clapping, for example. If someone starts clapping, everyone will probably follow. And I think this is actually a principle of persuasion, which is very hard for you like as a customer to overcome its effect and think individually when seeing this on websites. Another principle I'm going to talk about is the liking principle. It basically states that the more you like someone, the more you will be persuaded by him. And this can also be seen in the way people tend to make friends. It's about shared interests. It's just about shared interests. And for example, this is how I make friends. Oh my God, you like dogs or sports or cars, or oh, I like them too, let's be best friends. And I'm sure you can also notice this with people you are close to, that probably that whole relationship started by just having a common interest. It is also known and proved by science that beautiful people tend to sell more, which I know it's not really fair because genetics isn't like really nice with everyone, but it's a truth and we can't really fight it. Besides that, moving on to the unity principle, this actually is a, let's call it supersized version of the liking principle, because unity is not about shared interests like the one before was, but it's more about shared identities. That meaning like having a common past experience. I don't know, maybe you are bonding more easily with someone who went to the same college as you, or who practiced the same sport as you were when you were a kid, because it's normal for us to search for people who are similar. This is also exploited by using family ties on websites, and Cialdini also had a great experiment on this. In one of his Harvard classes, he actually tried to do an experiment using the students and their parents, and asked the students to complete a questionnaire, a survey, but also to ask their parents to complete it. They actually had no reward for doing this, and in this situation, only about 70% of students and just 20% of their parents completed the survey. After getting these results, Cialdini thought that he should tell the students that if both themselves and their parents are completing the survey, they are going to get 1 point more on the mark of that survey, of that homework. Actually, after knowing that their children are going to benefit from their answer, the parents consider that it would be better to answer And the rate went from 20% to almost a perfect one. It was just 97%. Even though you might notice that the reward is actually really small because a point on one homework isn't really going to influence your mark by so much in the end, parents felt somehow compelled to complete this in order to help their children succeed, and this is about actually shared identities. Moving on to the commitment principle, it is certain that people want their beliefs to be consistent with their values. Nobody wants to be seen as that kind of person who now thinks something, in 5 minutes they say no, they didn't say that, or they don't think that anymore. And people are actually trying to be consistent with what they are thinking and what they are saying. Actually, this is seen on the web in many places, as people, when they start to complete something or to fill something out, they somehow make a mental commitment to do that until the end. And this is really easy to observe in multi-step forms, because many of those start by asking you just some simple information like, I don't know, your name or hometown, or really brief information. But after that, after clicking on the call to action button, which is very important in the case of those multi-step forms, as the call to action is stating actually your intention to buy or to join or to do something regarding that product or service. After doing the first part of the questionnaire, when you are going to the next step, it probably is much larger, needs much more attention, and just much more information for you. But you already committed, you already told them your name, you told them your hometown, and you really want to do that. So you are going just to, let's say, ignore the difficulty or the questions or the difficult part you have to get through, I mean, completing that large survey in order to get the final results. So once you committed at first, you are very likely to finish doing that and just buy the product or join the community or do whatever the call to action asks you to. The next principle is the authority principle. And this can actually be seen a lot. I'm sure you have seen many ads on TV especially, or at least here it's like that, with doctors and dentists. Actually, the authority principle states that people are also hardwired to follow a, let's call it, leader or a figure of authority from that area of expertise without questioning if they have, I don't know, let's say, shady characters or shady actions. And it's even more obvious when we are talking about people who wear uniforms or people who are have job titles such as, I don't know, doctor, engineer, or even for military professions. We are more likely to listen to them without second thoughts. I have some examples. For example, you can even think of figures of authority like influencers. And Kim Kardashian, I don't know if you like her, but I think it's such a big personality, let's call it, or character, that it's impossible to miss it. And she is known to also be photographed wearing only the latest fashion, the latest shoes, getting the latest procedures done. And she is seen by many young people as a great figure of authority in this area. So she has collaborated with a great number of fashion retailers or different fashion industries, and their increase in sales has been really consistent. There is also a practice which is going on the web, which is called borrowing authority. I have one example. For example, in 2012, Dr. Oz, you probably know him, it's a famous doctor who has a TV show in the USA. Dr. Oz actually talked about krill oil on his TV show. And after that, there was a great number of websites which were selling krill oil, which actually stated on their website that they were endorsed by Dr. Oz, which technically it was true somehow, because Dr. Oz said many great things about krill oil, but he never mentioned any company name or anything related to a certain company selling or an advertisement. Besides this, you can see the authority principle on the internet. When talking about the badges like those verified by whatever antivirus they are using, or badges which indicate with which types of cards you can pay, or different badges such as that. Another principle is the scarcity principle. We are going to talk about it also later in more detail. That actually means that when you believe something is in short supply, you just want it more. This is actually due to the fear of missing out. You probably have already heard this term because it's pretty, let's call it fashionable right now, but it's very true. And you also should be careful because using scarcity should be done really, really carefully, as fake scarcity is going to do you more bad than good. Moving on to the neuromarketing basics part, you can see here a picture of our brain. We actually have 3 brains, or they are more like 3 layers. You can see it's the new brain, which was developed in the past years. It actually thinks. It is the one which analyzes and creates more complex thoughts and self-reflection and stuff like that. You have the middle brain, which is actually responsible for emotions. It feels. So you can actually, if thinking about this, that the new brain thinks and the middle brain feels, the conflict between mind and heart is more like a conflict between different parts of the brain. And the old brain is also called the reptilian brain because we share it with reptiles. Even nowadays, we are very similar in this structure. And it actually is the one which is primitive and takes decisions for us. You can see them also on the picture. And in order to get people to buy from you and to make that buying decision, which is actually crucial for the business, the stimuli that are triggering the old brain, you can see here, the old brain is very selfish because it is concerned with your survival primary, but also with the well-being of those who are close to you, your loved ones. The old brain is also triggered by contrast because we are hardwired to see differences in the environment, such as, I don't know, enemies appearing, or food, or different animals. And I also have an example for that. You should think that if you put a frog in boiling water, it is going to jump right off because it doesn't want to die. That's pretty normal. But if you are going to just put her in a bowl and put that which is with water which is lukewarm or just a little bit warm or even cold, and put that on the stove, the frog isn't going to jump out because the difference, the contrast between the temperature is not so obvious from the frog, as it is slowly increasing. So the frog is going to die. Another stimuli that is triggering the old brain is that we need tangible information, and that means clear words. It's easier for us to take the decision to do something if it's pretty easy to understand and quick to understand. For example, there are many companies which are stating that their value proposition with, I don't know, fancy words, let's say. For example, financial companies are saying that they are going to offer you more return on investment. Some people don't actually know that term, and that is a very specific term to an industry. So in order to appeal to more people and make the brain decide faster, you should use simple words such as, I don't know, more money. That's actually our whole purpose, the whole purpose of selling something. Another one is first and last, because people are triggered, the old brain is actually triggered by a change of state. Besides that, it's actually pretty non-active. Finding changes is pretty essential, and we are actually relying more on the first piece of information and the last piece. This is actually obvious also in real life, let's call it like that. For example, at cinemas, you can see that the difference in pricing between the medium and the large size is actually really small. The first size, the small, is put there like a first and anchoring, And the difference between medium and small is because between medium and large is because they all actually want to emphasize and convince you to buy the larger one. That is also why it is the last, and the small difference makes you think, okay, but I can pay, I don't know, like $2 more and get a much larger thing, even if you don't need it. I admit I am guilty of this like all the time. And I'm actually trying to educate myself to say so, to become a more aware customer, but sometimes it's pretty hard and the decision is already made and it's too late to back down when I realize it, because I don't want to be seen as inconsistent. So I made a commitment actually. Besides that, we also have the visual stimuli. The optical nerve is actually wired into the old part of the brain. And before the information takes actually like 2 milliseconds to reach the old brain, which is actually 25 times faster than, for example, the auditory nerve, on which we also rely heavily, I would say. This visual part of the brain, actually, the old brain analyzes the environment just in order to react to imminent threats. For example, if you are, I don't know, somewhere on a mountain hiking and you see a snake that is coming from under a rock, is coming out, your old brain is actually going to see that almost instantly, like I said, in 2 milliseconds, but it won't process. The new brain is going to process, okay, what is that? Is that a stick? Is that a snake? Should I be scared? Should I avoid it? But before the new brain actually analyzes this and decides the secondary movement, your old brain is going to say, oh, okay, back down. I don't know what that is, but it might be a danger. This is also true on websites because visual stimuli appeal faster and better to your old brain. Another stimuli, and the last one, is emotion, because people tend to be emotional a lot and go through many, I don't know, stages throughout the day. The emotion your website should invoke is actually the one you want people to feel. For example, if you are raising funds for, I don't know, animals, you should use a nice picture of animals, cute pictures, so you make people think, oh, this is so cute, I'm surely going to give you some money to protect tigers, I don't know, or whatever animal you like, because they are so cute and I like them so much. You made the person feel something, and emotion is very important in this situation. So moving on to the next part, we have cognitive biases, which are actually tendencies for us to think in a certain way. Even if you think you are not biased, so you don't actually think in some situation in the same way as other people, this is also a bias, and this is called the blind spot bias, which actually states that some people feel like they are so different that what they think isn't going to be taught as the same by other people. So if you think you're not biased, trust me, you are, and you are going to start recognizing these biases more and more every day. Some examples I have stated here, but there are many, many more biases, like hundreds of them, is the false consensus bias, where you think the world is like you. I know it's sometimes easier for us to assume that everyone is thinking like we do, everyone is feeling what we do, but actually maybe you're the only one. You should always try to consider, even if in your personal life, and I try to do this a lot when fighting with someone, you should try to consider the other person's point of view, as everyone is going through different things, everyone has had different past experience, and these are also reflected in the way you think, the way you speak, and the decisions you make. Another bias is the curse of knowledge, that states that you actually can't unknow what you already know. That is pretty normal in my opinion. You just can't pretend not to know something after you already learned it. Another one is the recency bias, which says that people tend to prefer new data over older one. And you can maybe see this in yourself when buying books. I tend to buy the newcomers or the new bestsellers instead of reading classical literature, for example. Another one is the clustering illusion, which is actually the tendency to perceive like small samples or small results, to be significant strikes, and you're just going to miss the bigger picture. Sometimes when you think you spotted a trend, you are going to be so focused on things actually following the trend, that you are just going to miss other things going on. And not all trends are actually patterns. It might just be a coincidence, and you should pay attention not to be too biased towards making that idea work. Another bias is anchoring, because you are relying heavily on the first piece of information presented. That was also a principle, if you remember that. You might be way too biased and just forget about the bigger picture. For example, if you, I don't know, if you see that your button looks off, let's say your button doesn't look like you want it to do, you might miss the bigger picture, and instead of thinking of, I don't know, a great redesign, you are just going to focus on changing colors or moving a button like a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, and ignore the decision which is going to bring you bigger results. We also have the egocentric bias, which means recalling past events in an exaggerated manner. And I see this a lot for my friends who like fishing, because they always said they caught the biggest fish. So, oh my God, last week I went fishing and I caught a fish which was like 10 kilos. And then I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. Can you show me a picture? And we look at the fish, and then my friend is like, okay, maybe it wasn't that big. But it's pretty normal to try to recall past events in an exaggerated manner, which is actually serving for you, for your, I don't know, social inclusion especially. There is also the confirmation bias, meaning that people actually have a tendency to test the things that confirm their beliefs. And this is actually happening a lot when doing development or doing research or even analysis, because most of the times when you realize something is wrong or something doesn't look right, you just state an hypothesis like, I don't like this, I need to change this. But you don't, you try to test only those things that are confirming what you are saying. You don't try alternate resources or try to see again the bigger picture. There is also the congruence bias, which is the tendency to test exclusively through direct testing instead of testing multiple cases. If you are working in programming or UX or even marketing, you probably know about A/B testing, which actually means testing more variations of basically the same idea, which can prove to be really helpful and have some sort of surprising results. So moving on to the next module, we have the attention basics. And you have probably already read about this, but researchers around the world have concluded that in the past 60 years, the attention span of people has reduced from somewhere like 15 seconds to about 3 or 4 seconds. So if you don't get their attention then, you are probably going to lose them. I hope I'm not guilty of this. I have tried to keep you attentive, but we'll really see at the end. We'll be talking about cognitive load and eye gaze and online reading patterns. So the cognitive load is actually the amount of mental energy that is required for you to process something, in this case, a website probably. There are multiple types of cognitive load or forms, let's call them like that. There is the intrinsic cognitive load, which actually means the complexity of the information. And I have an example for you. If you are buying, I don't know, a chair, you are probably going to get it home like in small pieces, and you have to actually build it. And you have a set of instructions which is breaking the intrinsic cognitive load into smaller tasks which are easier to perform, like add a screw here or put these two pieces of wood together. So it's making the load easier on your brain. There is also the extraneous cognitive load, which are the demands imposed by a supervisor or even by instruction sets. It's somehow like expectations that people have from you to do a certain thing or to learn a certain thing. And it can be quite difficult sometimes for us to cope with all these expectations and all this pressure. We also have the germane cognitive load, which is produced by the construction of mental schemas. And it is considered to be wanted because Once people have constructed a mental model for themselves, they are going to be way, let's call it happier, or it's going to be way easier for them to recognize it once they are coming back to your website or to a similar content after a certain time at a later moment. Moving on to eye gaze and online reading patterns. You can see here, I think it's the most famous one, which is the F pattern. It's actually more applicable to browsing results and even for text-heavy pages or articles. The F pattern is actually used for countries who are reading from left to right, but for the other countries which have a different style of reading, the F can be reversed or mirrored or in different forms, but it actually keeps its main structure. This pattern is used mainly for scanning for what you want. You are going to look for the first line of text, then you are going to look somewhere like in the middle of the page or top middle, and also scan the results vertically to see if what you are looking for is actually there. If you found the information you wanted, people are usually moving to the layer cake pattern, which is really searching for the section you are going to choose to see more specific information about your search terms. And after that, if you found the section, you are going to move to spotted pattern, where people actually are looking for main ideas, because it is well known that people only read very little of the content of web pages and tend to skip and just make a quick summary for themselves in their brain. So moving to the next modules, which is decision making and emotions. We are going to talk about the factors that influence decision making. We are going to talk a little bit about behavioral design, which is a very interesting topic, which I think would need a few hours to talk about. So maybe if you're interested, you should look into it more. And then we are also going to have a little plan about developing and testing an emotional content strategy. So the factors that influence decision making, you probably notice that we make many decisions every day. Some are smaller, like what are you going to eat today? What are you going to wear to work? But some can be bigger, like, I don't know, am I going to buy a car? Am I going to change my job? Am I going to, I don't know, take big decisions which are really influencing my life? Actually, when taking decisions, it's hard to notice how much is rational and how much is emotional. And you can be very easily influenced by different factors. So as you see here, you see the cognitive biases that we have talked about earlier. There actually are many categories of cognitive biases, among which there are memory biases, like we said, recalling things in a sureful manner. There are actually belief biases, omission biases, confirmation biases, and many other. But those biases and the things you are actually used to see and used to do are influencing you a lot. There are also memories which influence a lot your decision making, because I think it's natural that people tend to avoid doing the same past mistakes. Actually, we have a saying here in Romania, which my mom is telling me a lot, that I should try learning from other people's mistakes in order to avoid doing them myself and suffering even more. There is also the reason factor, which is based on the information available. Sometimes some companies tend to, I don't know, use partial information to help them boost sales. And this makes your decision making more influenced and more I don't know, maybe not appropriate, maybe not the best decision. There also are emotions which influence greatly our decision and our whole life. And there was an interesting study made that analyzed a person who actually had a brain trauma to the center of the brain, which processes emotion. And he actually had a very hard time to take decisions. Even though everything else was normal, he could speak, he could eat, he was totally normal, except he didn't feel any emotion. And this influenced greatly even simple decisions such as choosing what to eat. Moving on to the behavioral design, These are actually psychological strategies which are used to boost sales or to attain different goals set by yourself or by a company. I think you should also keep in mind that you can use this for your personal website or personal projects or even your daily interactions. So we have the description components, which I think it's pretty obvious that it's describing more about the product or giving you more information. It actually helps you a lot to take decisions and even like more informed decisions and to make use of mental models. There are many websites which are now choosing to offer like entire sensory experience for those description components. And I think it's pretty nice that there are more tutorials available or more information altogether. There is also the pressure tactic, which is inducing stress for you and making you hurry up into taking the decision. The deciding part is actually related to call to action buttons, even to your visuals, what you decide to use on the web page, and also on your copywriting. There is also the reinforcement, which assures people like they are taking the right decision. Oh, the motivation, which is based a little bit on Maslow's pyramid of needs. Once you have fulfilled your basic needs, like food, shelter, water, people are starting to try to fulfill their bigger needs. And this motivation is usually related to one or one of their more special needs. There is the social influence, which actually states to make people aware of the presence of others. There is trust, which brings fidelity to your brand and a greater relationship to the customers. And locators and facilitators, as you can probably think, locators and facilitators are actually menus, navigations, and design issues which make your site look better and make it easier for people to navigate. In order to develop and test your content strategy, which aims to be emotional, you actually start with a competitor analysis. You should start by analyzing a broad number of competitors, like 15 or maybe 20, but then restrict your analysis to the top 3 main competitors and look into their message, use of color, use of images, and emotional triggers. After that, you should make a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis on those competitors and also on your company or yourself. But you should also keep in mind all the industry related aspects, because some industries bring more opportunities than others and some come with bigger threats. Besides that, we have the content strategy, which should be based on the analysis, and actually it can use polls or surveys or different feedback tools to gain information from customers, what they actually want. It's even going to be easier for you. And then you have to test your strategy by relying on emotions, elements used, words, colors, and visuals. So moving on to the psychology of websites, we are going to talk about value propositions, urgency, and creating pages that address emotional needs. For value proposition, a value proposition is actually a promise of value you are going to deliver, or more simply put, an offer. You should be relevant. That means explain how your product or your service or even yourself are going to solve a problem or improve the situation your customer is going through. You should also have a quantified value. That means to deliver specific benefits. And you should also be unique, telling your customers why they should choose to buy from you and not from your competitors. Usually the value proposition has a headline, a sub-headline, which can also be a short paragraph, some bullet points, and a visual part. And in order to boost this, you can use free or fast or next day shipping. The money back warranty is also important and actually mandatory in some countries. And you can also use discounted prices or bonuses. Moving on to urgency, this can actually be seen a lot on travel websites or airlines websites. I think there were lately some pictures circulating on the internet from a big travel booking application, which used this kind of sentence like there are only 2 rooms left. And upon inspecting closely the code, actually the 2 was hard-coded or just a random number. So it was a fake feeling of urgency. You should make sure that if you are trying to convince people that your product won't be available for a long time, or the price you are selling it at is going to change soon, that should actually be true, because the customers are going to see right through you very quickly and lose all the trust they had. So to sum up, in order to create pages that address emotional needs, you are going to want to listen to your customers, try to get their opinion on this, try to allow them to customize their product or their service, and be present in the whole process of buying from the beginning, where they actually learn about you or they start to get to know you, up to the very end, even after they have actually bought. So the takeaways I would like for you to keep in mind: we have some persuasive techniques, so you should put the focus on maximum 3 selling propositions, create a consistent presence in all the media, including on SEO, on social media, and on your website. You should show visitors some cues from their past visits, so they recognize you without thinking, oh, I think I've been here before, but I'm not sure, maybe there were other people. So you should make them remember it's actually you. It's very good to ask questions or feedback in your content to allow people to tailor their custom product. Another important tip is to use faces to draw attention with gaze cueing, which means that that face of the person who is present on your website should actually look towards the most important content you are trying to present. Maybe your value proposition I talked about earlier. You should take care if your product is aimed towards risk-seeking people who actually want to buy more, to try some new things, to take some risks, or risk-adverse people who are more conservative, let's say so, and they just want to renew a subscription maybe. You should refer in your copy to vague or general personality traits, like, I don't know, all kind people like going outside. So use very general traits. People are going to be happy about them and actually feel you are talking about them there. You should guarantee your offer and support the forming of communities for your customers. Use many visual cues to emphasize content, how-to pages and tutorials. And it's very important when you are showing numbers, you should supersize them a little or downsize them a little. This actually brings an ethical concern, because, for example, you could say that you had 76% of your reviewers gave you 5 stars. And you can supersize them by saying, I don't know, like 99% of our active customers are giving us 5 stars. It's not a lie, but it's not actually accurate or relevant sometimes. You should also phrase questions and your call to actions according to your desired answers. Don't jump in for a buy, even as a customer, but also as a promoter or as a company. Don't ask your customer directly to buy. I see this a lot in mobile games I'm playing every day, and actually just upon entering the game, they are jumping with buy premium, get rid of the ads. But wait, I haven't even played. I don't know if I like it. And then maybe I'm going to pay for extra content. And another important tip is to do something unexpected, but make sure it looks good and it doesn't offend anyone. That is very, very important. So getting back to the ethical issues and the questions, I'm going to take, can you please put your questions in the Q&A section, or answer the same questions you did at the start? I'm really curious if your answers actually changed after learning this. I'm sure there are situations in which you can see yourself being biased or taking bad decisions, but I think it's human nature and we shouldn't be too harsh on ourselves, and just be happy with what we do and live a happy life in general. I'll be waiting for a few minutes for your questions or answers, and after that, I think Actually, the time is up and we will finish. I see that many of you actually are saying that some of these questions, the answer is no. Yes, I think that's actually true for me. The answer to most of this is no, but I don't know, sometimes it's needed or sometimes I understand the need for them because as a company, especially at a smaller one, there are many things that can influence or make your or break your strategy. So sometimes it's necessary. It's not good, but it's necessary. I see Marianne asking about any good books or resources for this. You should look into Cialdini's books. He has, I think, like 4 or 5 books on this topic. And you also find many great resources on the internet if you search for, I don't know, digital psychology, social psychology for the internet. So just look into the books of Cialdini. They are more theoretical, but also have lots of great examples. And also try to Google some things. You'll find very interesting researches, experiments, and the different results they had over the time. And you can also analyze how the behavior changed since they started doing this research until now, because there is a very, very big difference in lots of stuff. Thank you a lot for your attention. I hope you found the content interesting, and I look forward to maybe having another presentation on this subject where we can go even more deeper. If you want to learn more about this, just feel free to Google it, or you can reach me on Skype or LinkedIn. You'll see here, my name is Ancuța Pârvu. You'll find me pretty easily if you want to talk more about this. Thank you for all your attention, and I hope you also have had a great time because it was pretty awesome for me. So hopefully I'll see you next time.